everyone, and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing Defekt by Nino Cipri. This is a book that takes job loyalty and loyalty to corporate to a whole new level. But first of all, if you're new here, I post new book reviews almost every single day on both fiction and nonfiction books, so if that sounds interesting to you, feel free to stick around. Now, Defekt. So in Defekt, we are introduced to a character named Derek who works at a place called Littenvarld. Littenvarld is an IKEA knockoff, basically. It is IKEA. It's this home decor store with all sorts of crazy layouts and designs, and Derek loves his job. He's quite loyal to his job. He buys all into the corporate propaganda of "we are family." He doesn't miss shifts. He's happy to do his work and do it well. But he doesn't really think anything of this until one day he actually starts feeling under the weather. He doesn't think anything of that either until a coworker that he is working with notices that he is coughing up blood and asks him to please take the day off work. This is unthinkable to Derek, but after some prodding and some pushing, he does decide to take a sick day, the first in his entire life. When he comes in after his sick day, he thinks it's perfectly fine. He checked with the handbook that his coworker had shown him, and it said that he had sick leave to use. But corporate and his manager are not pleased with his sick day. He has a visit from someone from corporate, he has a discussion with his manager, and he is put on a nighttime inventory shift. He is supposed to come in after hours and do an inventory of the store. When he shows up for this inventory shift, it's clear that his manager is unhappy about this whole thing, kind of just throws him in the store, where he quickly discovers that things are a little odd in the store after hours, and two, his inventory management team, which is a team that he's never worked with before, they're from somewhere else, are comprised of many suspicious individuals, people who are suspiciously just like Derek, but a little different. I think this book did a really good job, despite it only being, it's a little over 100 pages, 160 pages. It does a really good job of conveying that spooky feeling right away. I do not like things that get too spooky. I never read horror or thrillers or anything like that, or I shouldn't say never, but I rarely read those because they scare me too much. And this book was not too scary in that regard. There was no gore, nothing like that. But the author did a really good job of creating that unsettling sensation right away. When Derek gets sick, he's thinking about his handbook that he received and things that he learned in his employee handbook. But when his coworker says, "Oh, you have accumulated sick leave," and shows him his handbook or the handbook that's in the employee break room, the first thing Derek notices is he's received a different handbook than everyone else has received, which is a little unsettling. Also, even though this seems like a normal place, I mean, we're basically working in IKEA, we're working a minimum wage shift job, there are things that are sci-fi in element right away, so you definitely know that you're not in the real world, or things are a little different from the world that we're familiar with. There's multiple universes, there are wormholes that open up in the store, there is animated home decor, and there are clones. So there's quite a bit that's different from our real world, but it just kind of slots in almost like our real world, so that is contributing to this sci-fi atmosphere that we have. I also like how when he shows up to the overnight inventory shift, everyone that Derek meets is almost like Derek. It does create a little bit of an unsettling feeling, even though I figured out what was going on quite quickly. I just feel like there was a little bit of unsettlement there, and I think the author could have played that up a little bit more because it would have contributed to that spooky, unsettling feeling throughout the entire book. I really enjoyed the base story. The base story was really good in my opinion. That whole plot I really enjoyed. There was a subplot the author tried to get going that was a romance, and this comes down to personal opinion. I almost never enjoy romance in books. I really have to want to like both of the characters independently and want them together before I start cheering for them as a couple. So because this other person named Darkness was kind of a romantic interest, it never really went very far, but it was enough to imply that the author wanted a little bit of romantic interest there. I didn't care. I didn't know this character well enough, and I didn't really care about what was going to go on there. So I think the whole romance subplot could have been kicked out in exchange for a little bit more spooky feeling about what was going on with this special inventory shift right away. That would have been the change I made, but I don't think most other people are going to care about that because that comes down to my personal opinion. I just prefer not to have romance cluttering up my sci-fi books unless I really like both of the characters and am cheering for them. So because I didn't have that, I didn't want to see romance in my book at all. But that was just my personal opinion. Another thing I want to know is that Defekt is actually number 2 in the series, and I did not realize this. The part that tells you that it's a sequel is actually covered up with a library barcode sticker on the back. So by the time I realized that this was number 2 in the series, I had already read the entire thing. That being said, I do find that some series it's required to read books in order. Like a lot of fantasy and sci-fi series, you got to read book 1, to read book 2, to read book 3. And there are some series, Cozy Mysteries are an example, where it kind of helps to understand the world better if you read them in order, but you're not required to read the series in order, or you can just read one by itself because it kind of works as a standalone, even though it might be more enjoyable or you might be more into the world if you've read them in order. So even though this was number 2, I didn't notice it was supposed to be the second in the series until I went to log it and look it up online, and I realized that it was second in the series. So I think this definitely works as a standalone. That being said, I have requested book 1 from my library because I want to read and learn more about this universe, because I think the author did a really good job creating a compelling and interesting universe. Overall, I really like Defekt. I highly recommend. If you're looking for a sci-fi read, or I would say sci-fi fantasy read that isn't too long, that isn't going to take a lot of time, maybe you have time constraints on your reading time, I think this would be a great place to start. Again, I don't think you need to read book 1 to enjoy this one, and it was enjoyable, funny, as well as a little spooky read overall. If you've read this book or anything else by Nino Cipri, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to receive them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.